The Miller family moved into their quiet suburban home 12 years ago. It wasn't new, but it had character. Creaking stairs, tall oak trees swaying in the wind, and a large, unfinished basement that Daniel Miller had always promised he'd turn into a workshop. For years, that promise was just a harmless dream. Daniel was a devoted father, a quiet man who worked long hours as a machinist, rarely missed a school play, and called his daughter Pumpkin in that calm, comforting tone that made her feel safe no matter what. But when the factory closed and the layoffs came, that calmness began to crack. He started spending his nights awake, sitting at the kitchen table long after everyone had gone to bed, staring at his hands like he didn't recognize them anymore. His wife, Lauren, found notes in his handwriting scattered across the counter. "It's not my fault. They said I can fix this. I just have to listen. At first, she thought it was stress, but the basement, that was where things began to unravel. Daniel started locking the basement door at night. He told the family it was for safety, that he was storing tools and didn't want anyone getting hurt. But soon, strange noises started coming from below. Not the sound of tools or hammering, but whispers, like two people having a quiet, angry conversation. Lauren once put her ear to the floor vent and froze when she heard her own name spoken in Daniel's voice, followed by another voice that rasped, "She won't understand. She never does." The kids, Ethan and Maggie, grew terrified of the basement. They said it smelled like old soil and iron. Ethan swore that when he peeked under the door one night, he saw bare feet pacing back and forth. But Daniel was asleep on the couch upstairs. Then came the night he told them about the promise. He sat them all down at dinner, smiling like he hadn't in months. His eyes were red-rimmed, his voice trembling. "I've been working on something special for us," he said. "A safe place. Somewhere the world can't hurt us." When Lauren asked what he meant, he just said, "You'll see soon." That night, he went down to the basement and nailed the door shut from the inside. The family heard hammering for hours, and then a lullaby. The same lullaby Lauren used to hum to Maggie when she was a baby. Days passed. No one saw Daniel leave. Food disappeared from the kitchen. The smell grew unbearable. And then, silence. Lauren finally broke the door open with a crowbar. What she found inside would haunt her for the rest of her life. The basement was spotless, walls freshly painted a pale blue. Children's drawings covered the walls, family portraits, but all with Daniel's face crossed out. In the center of the room was a rocking chair, moving slowly back and forth, though there was no wind and no fan. The air was heavy and cold, like the basement was breathing. On the far wall, written in thick black marker, were the words, "They're safe down here with me." And beneath it, taped carefully, were 3 photographs, Daniel, Ethan, and Maggie, all smiling. Except the last photo, the one of Maggie, was new. It had been taken from her school bag just days before. Daniel was never found. But every family that moved into that house after swore the same thing, that at night, when the house went still, the rocking chair in the basement would start to move. And if you listened closely enough, you could hear a man whisper from the shadows, "I promised I'd protect them." When people ask about my childhood, I never know where to start. I could tell them about the treehouse Dad built, the fishing trips, or how he used to tuck me in with ghost stories that somehow always ended with laughter. But those memories stopped belonging to me after Mom died. After that night, everything about him, the way he smiled, the way he looked at the backyard, started to change. He told me the world had rules, not the kind you find in books, but old ones, buried deep. "There are doors everywhere," he said once. Some you open with keys, some with blood, and some just with love. At the time, I didn't understand. It started with the backyard. He'd always been particular about it, but after Mom's funeral, he started digging. Every night, just digging. At first, it was in one corner, where Mom used to plant roses, but soon the holes multiplied. Perfect, circular holes. Too shallow for plants, too deep for reason. He'd come inside covered in dirt, whispering to himself. Once I caught him kneeling at the window, staring out into the dark yard and mouthing words that made no sense. I asked him what he was doing. He smiled, that hollow, sleepless kind of smile that never touched the eyes, and said, "Planting seeds for your mother. She'll need a way back." After that, he started talking to someone who wasn't there. Sometimes at breakfast, he'd glance at the empty chair where Mom used to sit and nod, as if listening. Once, I caught him serving her plate of eggs and softly saying, "You're getting stronger." Then came the smell. It was faint at first, wet soil and something sweet like rot. I'd wake up at night and hear movement outside, something dragging through the dirt. One evening I heard soft crying coming from the yard. I thought it was Dad. But when I peeked through the window, I saw him kneeling by one of the holes, shirtless, his skin pale under the porch light. His hands were deep in the ground. Around him were small glass jars, about a dozen, each filled with something dark. When he moved, the light caught on them and I saw what was inside: hair, nails, and what looked like teeth. He whispered Mom's name over and over, his voice breaking like he was choking on it. "Rebecca, come back. I did what you asked." I was frozen. Then he stopped suddenly and looked up, not at me, but at the house. His head tilted slowly, and though the porch light was dim, I swear he was smiling. I ran back to bed and hid under the covers. The next morning, the kitchen floor was muddy. There were footprints, not his size, smaller, almost childlike. They led from the back door to my parents' bedroom. I followed them, heart pounding. The room smelled wrong, not just dirty but alive, like something damp and breathing. The bed covers were pulled back, the sheets still wet with soil. I screamed for Dad. He came running in, looked at the bed and whispered, "She found her way." That night, he made me sit by the window with him. "If you see her," he said softly, "don't open the door. She doesn't know who she is yet. She'll be confused." His eyes looked sunken, his pupils small and fixed. "She'll knock 3 times. If you answer before she remembers your name, she'll take you too." I wanted to cry. I wanted to tell him to stop, but his hand gripped mine hard, too hard. "Promise me," he said. "Don't answer the knocks." 2 nights later, I heard them. 3 soft knocks. I sat up in bed, shaking. I could hear the back door creak open, then footsteps, slow, wet, dragging. When I peeked down the hall, I saw her. My mother. At least, I think it was her. She was wearing her old nightgown, but it hung off her like it didn't fit anymore. Her hair was matted with mud, and her eyes were sunken deep, black as the holes Dad had dug. She stood in the living room, swaying slightly, and turned her head toward the kitchen, toward me. Her neck cracked. "Danny," she whispered, voice raw and distant. "It's cold." Then Dad appeared behind her. He fell to his knees, crying, holding her wrists. "I knew you'd come back. I knew love was enough." She looked down at him, head tilted, expression blank. "You shouldn't have called me," she rasped. "I wasn't ready." The ground shook beneath us. Every light in the house flickered. The walls groaned like the house itself was breathing. I fell back, covering my ears as my dad screamed her name over and over, trying to hold her. Then she screamed back. A long, wet animal sound that didn't belong in a human throat. The lights exploded. When I could see again, she was gone. Dad was lying inside a perfect circle burned into the carpet. Soil packed under his fingernails, his eyes rolled white. When he woke up hours later, his voice wasn't his anymore. "It worked," he said quietly. "She's in me now." His face twitched as he said it, half smiling, half crying. His skin looked too tight, like something underneath was trying to push out. That was the last time I saw him before they took him away. The police found him days later in the forest, barefoot and covered in scratches, cradling something small in his arms. They thought it was an animal at first. It wasn't. It was one of those glass jars from the backyard. Inside was a shriveled piece of flesh shaped like a heart. When they brought me to identify him, he was sitting in a hospital gown, staring at the wall, whispering to himself. "She's growing," he said. "The roots go deep." A few months ago, I went back to sell the house. The yard was overgrown, the air heavy and still. I walked to the spot where he dug those holes. The ground was soft. And right in the middle, where the ritual circle used to be, a single rosebush had grown. Tall, vibrant, red as blood. When I knelt to touch it, my hand brushed something beneath the roots. A small pale finger. It still had my mother's wedding ring on it. And when I looked up for a brief second, I saw my father standing in the kitchen window smiling at me. My dad used to say that the attic was where the truth lives. When I was little, I thought that meant it was where he kept old memories. Photo albums, trophies, my mom's dresses from when she was young. But when I got older, I realized he meant something else entirely. The attic was where he went to talk to himself. Or at least that's what I thought. We moved into my grandparents' house after Mom passed. Dad said it would be temporary, but months turned into years. He rarely came downstairs anymore. He'd stay up there for hours, talking in low murmurs to someone I couldn't hear. When I asked who he was talking to, he said, "To your mother. You just can't hear her yet." I was 12. I wanted to believe him. But every night the whispering got louder and it didn't sound like just one voice. Sometimes I'd wake up to the sound of furniture moving across the floor above me. Once the attic door creaked open by itself in the middle of the night. I saw my dad's shadow standing at the top of the stairs, unmoving, his head tilted toward me. The next morning he had no memory of it. One afternoon I came home from school to find him sitting in the living room, staring at an old photograph of Mom. The frame was cracked and the picture had been scratched, her face mostly. He looked up at me and smiled. "She forgave me," he said.
For what?
For what I had to do. I didn't know what that meant, but I didn't ask. That night, I heard him dragging something heavy up the attic stairs. The next morning, there was a new padlock on the door. He started keeping a notebook on the kitchen counter, full of strange numbers, dates, and names I didn't recognize. At the top of every page, he'd written, "Confession schedule." When I asked what it meant, he just said, "You'll understand when it's your turn." The first time I broke into the attic, I did it because of the smell. It started faint, like old wood and mildew, but by the third week it was unbearable. The air downstairs felt thick and sweet, like something rotting behind the walls. I waited until he left for groceries, then grabbed a hammer and pried the lock open. I wish I hadn't. The first thing I saw was the photograph. It was nailed to one of the beams. My mother's face burned around the edges. Beneath it, the words, "I'm sorry," were carved into the wood over and over until the surface bled splinters. There were jars on a shelf, dozens of them, each one filled with something dark. Soil, hair, what looked like small teeth. I tried not to look too closely. In the center of the attic was a single wooden chair. A tape recorder sat on the floor beside it, still running. I pressed play. At first it was just breathing, then my father's voice. Confession number 31. I told her I wouldn't hurt them, but she doesn't believe me. She never believes me. A pause. They don't understand what's in the walls, what she wants. She says I have to finish the pattern before she stops screaming. More breathing, then a sound like something scratching the microphone. It's almost your turn, Matthew. Don't hate me when it happens. It's how we stay together. The tape clicked off. I felt sick. Then I heard the attic steps creak behind me. "Son," he said softly from the shadows of the doorway. I turned, my heart pounding. He was standing halfway up the stairs, his face pale and trembling, eyes wide with something between fear and relief. "I told you not to come up here," he whispered. "Dad, what is all this?" "She told me you'd try," he said, voice breaking. "She said you'd stop me." "Stop you from what?" He stepped closer. His hands were shaking. "From finishing the confession." I backed away. "You're scaring me." He smiled faintly. "I know, I scared her too." Before I could speak, he lunged for the recorder. I grabbed it first and he screamed, a sound I didn't know humans could make. He slammed me into the wall, his hands tightening around my throat. But then his face changed. His expression softened. Tears filled his eyes. "You sound just like her," he whispered, begging like she did. I kicked him away and ran downstairs. He didn't chase me. When the police arrived, they found him sitting in the attic, humming softly to himself. The jars were gone. The photo was gone. The words "I'm sorry" had been carved into the floor in perfect rows, like someone had done it calmly over hours. They took him to a psychiatric hospital. That was 6 years ago. He still sends me letters. Each one dated the same way. Confession number, followed by a number higher than the last. The last one I received was 3 weeks ago. It read, "Confession number 72. I heard her again in the attic. She says she misses you." I never went back to that house. But last night I found something in my own apartment, an unmarked envelope sitting on the kitchen counter. Inside was a cassette tape labeled Confession number 73. And written on the back in my father's handwriting were 3 words. "Play it upstairs." The first time I heard the key turn in my bedroom door, I thought Mom was just being protective again. She'd always been that way, cautious, anxious, convinced the world was full of invisible dangers. But as the years went by, that small click at night stopped sounding like love and started feeling like prison bars sliding shut. That night was colder than usual. The wind outside was howling through the trees, and I could hear the pipes groaning in the walls. I was half asleep when I heard it. The slow creak of the hallway floorboards, the faint shuffle of her slippers. I didn't move. I'd learned not to. The key scraped softly against the lock, then turned with that familiar metallic sound that made my stomach twist. Click. My room was sealed again. I opened my eyes to the orange glow of the nightlight by my bed. The wallpaper was peeling in the corners, the ceiling cracked above me. Every little detail etched into my brain from years of staring at them night after night, waiting for morning. "Mom?" I whispered, even though I knew she wouldn't answer. There was only silence, broken by the faint hum of the refrigerator 2 rooms away. When I was a kid, I used to think she locked me in because she loved me, because she wanted to keep me safe. That's what she always said. The world is full of bad people, baby. You're safest when Mommy knows exactly where you are. But as I got older, things started to change. The locks got heavier. The explanations got stranger. Sometimes I'd wake up and see her standing in the hallway through the gap under my door, her bare feet visible in the strip of light. Just standing there, not moving. For hours, Once, when I was 10, I asked her why she did it. She smiled and stroked my hair. "Because something tries to come in at night," she said softly, "and Mommy's the only one keeping it out." At that age, I believed her. At 14, I didn't. The house had grown old and tired by then. The paint yellowed, the air always smelled faintly of mildew, and the silence stretched like a living thing between us. She didn't let me go to school anymore, said people were dangerous, that they didn't understand. I'd spend days locked in my room, doing lessons from old books, listening to her talk to herself downstairs. But I swear sometimes she wasn't talking to herself. I'd hear her whispering softly in the kitchen, low and rhythmic like a prayer. Then a pause. Then another voice. It wasn't her. It was deeper, slower, like it was coming from inside the walls. The night everything changed, I remember the smell first, something sour and metallic seeping through the vents. It woke me up. I sat up, heart pounding. Then came the scratching, faint at first, like a mouse trapped behind the drywall. But it grew louder, angrier, scraping closer to the headboard of my bed. I called out, "Mom!" Her footsteps came quickly down the hallway, faster than I'd ever heard her move before. The light outside my door flickered, and then her voice, sharp and breathless. "Don't talk to it." I froze. "What?" "Don't answer, it listens." The scratching stopped. I could hear her breathing outside, short and shallow. The silence stretched until I could hear my heartbeat echo in my ears. Then something else. A slow tap, tap, tap against the wall behind me, like long nails dragging across the plaster. I pressed my back against the opposite wall, trembling. "Mom, what is it?" Her voice cracked when she answered. "It's why your door stays locked. It's why your father left. Please don't open it." I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the door until morning. When she brought breakfast through the small slot she'd cut at the bottom of it, she didn't meet my eyes. She looked pale, shaking, whispering something under her breath as she slid the plate through. I caught only 2 words: not safe. That afternoon, I pressed my ear to the wall where the scratching had been. At first, I heard nothing. Then, faintly, a voice, a whisper. My name. It sounded exactly like hers. When I pulled away, the paint was cracked in a perfect circle the size of a handprint, as though something had been pressing from the other side. That night, she locked my door earlier than usual. I heard her pacing outside, whispering to herself again. But around midnight, her voice changed. It wasn't her anymore. It was wrong, slurred, like someone trying to sound like her. Then a whisper from the wall, closer this time. "She's lying to you." I pressed my palms over my ears. "Stop it!" The next thing I remember is her screaming, a deep, guttural scream from the hallway, raw and terrified. The lights flickered and then silence. I didn't hear her again for 2 days. When I finally woke to footsteps, I called her name. No answer, just the creak of the doorknob. The lock turned slowly, and the door opened a few inches. I saw her face in the gap, or what I thought was her face. It was too pale, the skin stretched too tight, eyes too wide. "Mom?" I whispered. She smiled. Her voice was calm. "It's safe now, baby. You can come out." But something in me, something deep, said no. I shut the door and locked it myself. The next morning, the food slot was empty. The house was silent. I pushed a note under the door asking if she was okay. A few minutes later, it slid back, written in her handwriting. "Don't worry, sweetheart, Mommy's keeping you safe. You're not the one I'm locking in." That was 3 days ago. The scratching is back, only this time it's coming from both sides of the wall. The light outside my door flickers every night at exactly 3:12 a.m. And last night it's when I heard her voice again, only it wasn't coming from the hallway. It was whispering right behind the wall, and it wasn't calling my name, it was laughing. There were 3 rules in my house growing up. Never touch Dad's tools, never leave food unfinished, and never ever go near the basement after dark. I broke the first 2 plenty of times and got the usual punishments, chores, lectures, maybe a slap on the wrist. But the 3rd rule, that one wasn't negotiable. Dad didn't just say it, he enforced it like it was a law of nature. He'd lock the basement door every night at exactly 9 p.m., checking it twice, sometimes 3 times, before finally going to bed. I used to think it was weird but harmless. Then I realized the lock wasn't to keep people out. It was to keep something in. When Mom was alive, the house was full of light and laughter. She used to hum while cooking, and Dad would join in just to make her smile. But one rainy evening, a car accident took her away, or so I was told. After the funeral, Dad changed. He stopped singing, stopped eating properly, stopped smiling altogether. He started talking to himself, low, muttering whispers that echoed through the house at night. Sometimes I'd find him sitting on the basement stairs, door open just a crack, staring into the dark. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "Listening. She's still down there." The first time I heard the noise, I thought I was dreaming. It was a slow, rhythmic tapping, like someone gently knocking on the wooden beams beneath the floor. Then came the whisper, faint, wet, almost too soft to hear. "Daniel." That was my dad's name. I froze in bed, listening. The sound came again, a dragging, scraping noise like nails against concrete. I could hear the basement door creak open, followed by his footsteps descending the stairs. Then silence. The next morning, Dad looked pale and exhausted. There was dirt under his fingernails and a bruise forming on his jaw. When I asked what happened, he said he'd been working, but he hadn't done carpentry in months. A week later, I caught him in the basement again. The air smelled awful, metallic and damp like rust mixed with rot. He was sitting on the floor, surrounded by old candles and chalk markings. A circle had been drawn around him, filled with strange symbols. He looked up when he saw me, startled. His eyes were bloodshot, his lips cracked. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "It's almost time to play the game." "What game?" I asked, terrified. He smiled faintly, like he'd just remembered something beautiful. "The one your mother started. The one she never finished." That night, he locked the basement door as usual, but I noticed something new. There was whispering behind it, not his voice, something lower. And then I heard her laugh, my mother's laugh. I told myself it was grief, that Dad was losing his mind. But the sounds kept coming. Every night, 3 a.m., the same whispers, the same tapping like a heartbeat under the house. Then one night I woke to find my bedroom door open and the hallway light flickering. Dad was standing at the end of the hall, half in shadow. He was holding something in his hand, a key. "It wants to meet you," he said softly. "It's been asking for you." I shook my head. "Dad, please don't." He smiled sadly. "You'll see her again, isn't that what you want?" Before I could respond, he turned and walked downstairs. The basement door creaked open. The smell of dirt and decay filled the house. I followed, barefoot and shaking. The basement was lit by a single lantern, flickering weakly. The chalk circle was still there, but this time, there was something inside it. A large shape covered by a sheet. Dad knelt beside it, whispering to himself, tears streaming down his face. "I promised I'd bring you back," he said. "I built you better this time. You'll never leave again." He pulled the sheet away. Underneath was her, or what was left of her. It was a body, or a sculpture of one, made from pieces of wood, wire, and something else I couldn't identify. Her hair was real, long and tangled. Her fingers were carved from wood, but the nails were human. And her face, pale, stretched tight, stitched where the mouth should have been. "Do you see her?" Dad asked, voice trembling. "She looks just like before." I stumbled backward, covering my mouth. "That's not Mom." He smiled, broken and proud. "She spoke to me last night, said she's lonely down here, that she wants us all together again." Then the light flickered, and it moved. The head tilted toward me, the sound of cracking wood echoing through the room. Something wet dripped from its mouth stitches. Dad gasped, falling to his knees. "You see? She's waking up." The creature's arm twitched, once, twice. Then it reached for him, its fingers wrapped around his neck with impossible strength. He didn't even fight. He just whispered, "I missed you," before it squeezed. The lantern shattered. When I awoke, the house was silent. The smell of smoke and rot filled the air. I ran out of the basement, locking the door behind me. I never told anyone what I saw, not the police, not the social worker, not even my aunt who took me in after they declared Dad missing. But for years I dreamed of that circle, the whispers, the game he played. 20 years later, I got a call from the city office. They were demolishing the old property, and something strange had been found buried under the foundation. A small wooden box. Inside was a tape recorder. When I pressed play, I heard my father's voice. "It's your turn now," he said softly. "You have to finish the game." There was a pause. Then faintly behind his words, a voice I hadn't heard in decades. My mother, whispering my name. That night I woke to tapping on the floor. 3 slow knocks, just like before. When I opened my eyes, the key to the basement door was sitting on my nightstand, and underneath it, carved into the wood, were the same words from the recording. Your turn. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there's plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to Night Fear Stories for new terrifying tales every single night. Sleep well, if you can.